There comes a moment when you realize that no matter how hard you fight, how much you plan, or how desperately you try to control the outcome, some things are beyond you. And that's not a sign of weakness. That's an invitation to trust that the same God who created the stars, the same God who carved the oceans deep, the same God who breathed life into your very being, He's got this. He's got you. The journey of life is filled with twists, turns, and unexpected detours. We make plans, set goals, and dream of how things should be, but often life does not unfold the way we envision. In those moments of uncertainty, fear, and frustration, we find ourselves questioning, wondering if we are truly on the right path, if we are truly seen, if we are truly cared for. But the truth remains, before you even had a name, before you took your first breath, before the world even knew you, the hand of God was already upon you. The same hand that formed you in the secret places, the hand that is guiding you, covering you, protecting you, and writing your story. And if God formed you with intention, if He shaped you with purpose, then why do you doubt the process He is leading you through? To trust the hand that formed you is to believe that you are not an accident. It is to understand that your existence is not random or incidental, but divinely orchestrated. Every detail about you, your personality, your gifts, your struggles, and even the things you wish you could change was crafted by a God who does not make mistakes. He knew what you would need to endure this life. He knew the battles you would face, the storms you would walk through, and the moments that would test your faith. He did not form you without equipping you. You may feel inadequate, but God does not call the qualified. He qualifies the called. If He formed you, He will sustain you. If He created you, He will guide you. If He shaped you with His own hands, then He knows exactly what you need. And when you need it, yet trusting the hand that formed you means surrendering the need to understand everything. We like control. We like to have the answers, to see the full picture, to know every step before we take it. But faith is not about having all the answers. It is about trusting the one who does. When a sculptor creates a masterpiece, the clay does not ask the potter, "What are you making? Why are you stretching me? Why are you pressing me?" The clay submits to the process because it is in the hands of the one who sees the finished work. You are in the hands of the Creator who knows the masterpiece He is shaping you into. There will be moments when life feels unfair, when it seems as if God has forgotten you, when it looks like everything is falling apart. In those moments, the enemy will try to convince you that God's hands are no longer on you. He will whisper lies, making you feel abandoned, unloved, and unworthy. But the enemy is a deceiver, and his goal is to make you forget who you are and whose you are. The very fact that you are facing resistance is proof that you are in the process of becoming. Do not let temporary struggles make you doubt an eternal God. Just because you do not see His hand moving does not mean it is not there. Even in silence, God is working. Even in darkness, His hands are holding you. You have to remind yourself that the same God who formed you is the same God who formed the heavens and the earth. The same God who set the sun in place and told the ocean where it is, the same God who breathed life into you. If His hands could shape the universe, then surely His hands are strong enough to hold your life together. Trusting His hand means understanding that even when things do not make sense, even when the road is unclear, even when your heart is heavy, He is still in control. God's hand is not just forming you in the beginning, His hand is shaping you even now. Every experience, every trial, every delay, every closed door is a part of the process. The pain you have felt, the disappointments you have endured, and the tears you have cried were not wasted. God does not waste anything. He takes what was meant to break you and uses it to build you. He takes what was meant to destroy you and uses it to develop you. You may not see it now, but one day you will look back and realize that every moment, every heartbreak, and every challenge was shaping you into the person you were always meant to be. The problem is that we often trust God when things are going well, but when things get difficult, we begin to doubt. We trust His hand when it is blessing us, but we question it when it is breaking us. But even in the breaking, even in the stretching, even in the pruning, his hand is still good. His hand does not move to harm you. It moves to prepare you. His hand does not withhold to punish you. It withholds to protect you. If you could see what he was protecting you from, if you could see the dangers he diverted, if you could see the greater blessing he was setting up for you, you would not question his process. You would praise him for it. So today, I urge you, trust the hand that formed you. Stop fighting what God is shaping. Stop resisting what he is molding. Stop questioning what he has already confirmed. His hand was on you before the world even knew you. His hand was on you in the moments you felt alone. His hand was on you when you thought you had lost everything. His hand was on you when you thought you had failed. And his hand is on you right now. You are not forgotten. You are not forsaken. You are still in the hands of the one who formed you. And if his hand is on you, then no weapon formed against you will prosper. Trust him even when you do not understand. Trust him even when it does not make sense. Trust him even when it hurts. His hands are steady. His hands are strong. His hands are faithful. And if you leave everything in his hands, you will see that his plans for you were always greater than anything you could have imagined. Let go, surrender, trust. The one who formed you will never fail you. The need for control is something deeply ingrained in human nature. We like to plan, predict, and prepare for every outcome. We want to know what's coming next, how things will work out, and what steps we need to take to make everything go according to plan. But life has a way of reminding us that no matter how much we try to control, there are things that are simply beyond our reach. There are moments when doors close despite our best efforts, when people leave even though we gave them our best, when situations unravel despite our careful planning. And in those moments, frustration creeps in, anxiety builds up, and we find ourselves questioning God, wondering why things aren't happening the way we envision. But the truth is, the sooner we release the illusion of control, the sooner we will walk in the peace, power, and freedom that comes from truly trusting God. Control is an illusion, but surrender is power. When we try to control everything, we carry a weight that was never meant for us to bear. We exhaust ourselves trying to manipulate outcomes, forcing things to happen in our own strength, and doing everything we can to make sure nothing goes wrong. But the problem with control is that it tricks us into thinking that we are the authors of our own destiny. It makes us believe that if we just work hard enough, if we just say the right things, if we just push a little harder, everything will turn out exactly how we want. But life has proven time and time again that we are not the ones writing the story. God is. And the moment we acknowledge that truth, the moment we stop striving and start surrendering, is the moment we step into the divine flow of his plan. Releasing control does not mean we become passive. It does not mean we stop working, stop dreaming, or stop making wise decisions. It means we do what we can and leave the rest in God's hands. It means we stop obsessing over things that are beyond our ability to change. It means we stop losing sleep over what has already been decided in heaven. It means we stop fighting battles that were never meant to be ours in the first place. When you release control, you are not giving up, you are giving it to God. And when God takes over, things begin to move in ways that you could never orchestrate on your own. Think about all the times in your life when you tried to make something happen in your own strength only to end up exhausted, disappointed, or heartbroken. How many times have you forced something that was never meant for you? How many times have you held onto a situation that God was trying to release you from? How many times have you worried yourself sick over something that in the end worked out exactly as it was supposed to? We spend so much time worrying, overthinking, and trying to manipulate circumstances when all along God was saying, I've got this, let go. When we refuse to release control, we often find ourselves stuck in cycles of fear and anxiety. Fear of the unknown, fear of what will happen if things don't go our way, fear of what we will lose if we let go. But here's the truth, fear is a liar. Fear will convince you that if you don't hold on tighter, everything will fall apart. But what if the thing that's actually keeping you bound is your refusal to let go? What if the very thing you're trying to control is the thing that's controlling you? God did not call us to live in fear. He called us to walk by faith. And faith is trusting in what you cannot see. It is believing that even when things look uncertain, God is still working. It is understanding that just because you don't have all the answers doesn't mean God doesn't have a plan. One of the greatest acts of faith is releasing control. It is saying, God, I trust you more than I trust myself. It is admitting that his ways are higher than our ways. His thoughts are higher than our thoughts, and his timing is better than our timing. It is recognized no matter how much we try to manipulate circumstances, God's plan will always prevail. And here's the thing, when we let go, we make room for God to move. We release control. We step out of the way and allow him to do what only he can do. Look at the stories in the Bible of people who tried to take control instead of trusting God. Sarah tried to force God's promise by giving Hagar to Abraham, and it created unnecessary strife. Moses tried to take matters into his own hands by killing an Egyptian, and it delayed his purpose. But then look at the moments when people surrendered and let God lead. When Esther surrendered, she saved an entire nation. When Joseph let go of bitterness and trusted God's plan, he became a ruler in Egypt. When Jesus himself prayed, not my will, but yours be done, he fulfilled the greatest purpose of all time. The difference between struggle and success in the kingdom is not striving, it's surrender. You do not have to have all the answers. You do not have to figure everything out. You do not have to control every outcome. God is not asking you to have it all together. He is asking you to trust that he does. When you let go, you will find peace. When you surrender, you will experience freedom. When you stop striving and start trusting, you will see that God's plan was always greater than anything you could have orchestrated on your own. So today, make the decision to release control. Make the decision to stop carrying what was never meant to be yours. Make the decision to trust God with the things you cannot change, because when you do, you will finally understand that true strength is not found in controlling everything. It is found in surrendering everything to the one who is already in control. Waiting is one of the hardest things to do. It tests our patience, our faith, and our ability to trust God beyond what we can see. We live in a world that moves fast, where we want things instantly, instant success, instant answers, instant breakthroughs. And when we pray and nothing happens right away, when we believe and still face delays, we start to wonder if God has forgotten us. We start to question if we heard him correctly. We start to doubt if the promise was ever real. But what we often fail to realize is that God's delay is not his denial. Just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it's not going to happen. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not already in motion. The delay is not a punishment, it's preparation. God is never late. He is never behind schedule. He does not operate on our timeline, and he does not feel pressured by our impatience. When he makes a promise, he fully intends to fulfill it, but he does it in his way and in his time. The delay you are experiencing is not a sign that God is ignoring you. It's a sign that he is working behind the scenes, setting things up in a way that you could never orchestrate on your own. There are some blessings you are not ready for yet. There are some doors that if they open too soon, you wouldn't be prepared to walk through. There are some battles that God is fighting on your behalf that you don't even know about. Think about the story of Joseph. God gave him a dream when he was just a teenager, a vision of greatness and leadership. But that promise didn't come to pass overnight. Joseph had to endure betrayal, slavery, false accusations, and imprisonment before he ever saw the fulfillment of what God showed him. Can you imagine how many nights Joseph must have questioned if God had forgotten him? Can you imagine how many times he must have wondered why he was facing delay after delay? But what looked like a delay was actually divine positioning. Every step, every hardship, every moment of waiting was preparing him for the position God had destined him to hold. If Joseph had stepped into his promise too soon, he wouldn't have been ready for the weight of his assignment. God's delays are never wasted. They refine you, they shape you, they mature you. There are some things you are praying for that require a different version of you than the one standing here today. There are some doors you are asking God to open, but He is waiting for you to develop the character and wisdom to sustain what's on the other side. The worst thing is not waiting. The worst thing is stepping into something prematurely and losing it because you weren't ready. God loves you too much to let that happen. Sometimes the delay is about what's happening inside of you. There are lessons that only the waiting season can teach you. Waiting produces patience, and patience produces endurance, and endurance produces character. You can't rush what God is doing in you. There are some things that time alone can develop. Some wisdom only comes through experience. Some strength only comes through adversity. If you are waiting, it is not because God is withholding something from you. It is because He is preparing you for something greater. There is also another truth we must acknowledge. Sometimes the delay is about what God is aligning around you. You may be ready, but the right people, the right opportunities, or the right circumstances may not be in position yet. Imagine David being anointed as king, but stepping into the throne before Saul had been removed. Imagine Esther being in the palace before the threat against her people had been revealed. God knows the exact moment when everything needs to come together. He is not just working on you, He is working on everything connected to you. We must also be careful not to let impatience drive us into making our own plans outside of God's will. Look at Abraham and Sarah. God promised them a child, but when years passed and nothing happened, they took matters into their own hands. Sarah gave Abraham her maidservant Hagar in an attempt to force what God had already promised. But their impatience led to unnecessary pain and conflict. What if they had just waited? What if they had trusted that the same God who made the promise was faithful enough to fulfill it? And that is the real question today. Do you trust that God will fulfill what He promised? Do you trust that He knows the right time, the right season, the right moment? Because if you truly trust Him, then you will understand that the waiting is not meant to build you. It is not meant to discourage you. It is meant to develop you. It is not meant to make you give up. It is meant to make you stronger. The enemy will try to use delay to plant doubt in your mind. He will try to convince you that because it hasn't happened yet, it's never going to happen. He will try to make you feel forgotten, overlooked, and abandoned, but the devil is a liar. If God spoke it, He will fulfill it. If He started it, He will complete it. His delay is not His denial. So instead of growing frustrated in the wait, grow in the wait. Use this time to develop your faith, to deepen your relationship with God, to sharpen your skills, to prepare for the thing you are praying for. To learn in this season, what are you trying to develop in me? How can I use this time to get ready for what you have promised? Because if you shift your perspective, you will realize that the waiting season is not a wasted season. It is a preparation season. When a farmer plants a seed, he does not expect to see fruit the next day. He understands that growth happens beneath the surface before it ever becomes visible. He does not dig up the seed every day to check if it is growing. He trusts the process. He waters it, nurtures it, and gives it time. And when the time is right, the seed that was buried breaks through the ground and becomes what it was always meant to be. Some of you are in a season where you feel buried, but you are not buried, you are planted. God is doing something beneath the surface. He is growing something inside of you. He is developing strength, endurance, faith, and wisdom that you will need when you step into your promise. Waiting is not easy, but it is necessary. It teaches you to trust God's timing, to lean on His wisdom, and to believe in His faithfulness. It teaches you that God is not in a hurry, but He is always on time. It reminds you that He does not just give you what you want, He gives you what is best for you. And sometimes what is best for you takes time. There will be moments when you feel like nothing is happening. There will be days when you question if God even remembers you. But I need you to know that even when it looks like nothing is happening, something is happening. God is moving in ways that you cannot see. He is setting things in order. He is preparing you for the promise and preparing the promise for you. And when the time is right, He will make it happen. So do not give up in the waiting. Do not let impatience push you into something that is not for you. Do not allow frustration to make you settle for less than what God has promised. Trust the process. Trust the timing. Trust that God's delays are not denials. They are divine setups for something greater. One day you will look back at this season and realize that the waiting was worth it. You will see that every delay was necessary. Every hardship was a lesson. Every closed door was protection. And every not yet was a step towards something better. The same God who gave you the promise is the same God who will fulfill it. Keep trusting. Keep believing, keep preparing, because when the wait is over, you will step into something so much greater than you could have imagined. And in that moment, you will understand that God's timing was always perfect. Life has a way of pushing us to the edge, making us question whether we are truly seen, known, or valued. We go through trials that shake our faith, disappointments that weigh on our hearts, and setbacks that make us wonder if we will ever move forward. And in those moments, it is easy to feel forgotten. It is easy to believe that God has overlooked us, that He has blessed everyone else while leaving us behind. But I need you to understand something deep in your spirit today. God has not forgotten you. He sees you, He knows you, and He is working on your behalf even when it feels like nothing is happening. The enemy would love for you to believe that you are invisible to God. He whispers lies in your ear, telling you that your prayers don't matter, that your tears go unnoticed, and that your faithfulness has been in vain. But let me remind you of the truth. The same God who created you is the same God who sustains you. He knows every detail of your life. He knows the weight you carry. He knows the silent battles you fight when no one else is watching. And He has not forgotten you. It is hard to wait when you feel unseen. It is hard to keep pressing forward when it seems like your efforts are producing no results. But just because you don't see movement doesn't mean God isn't working. Some of the most significant breakthroughs happen beneath the surface before they ever become visible. Think about a seed planted in the ground. For weeks, nothing appears to be happening. But underneath, roots are growing deep, stabilizing and strengthening so that when the time is right, the plant can rise and flourish. Some of you are in a season where it looks like nothing is changing, but God is strengthening your foundation. He is preparing you for something greater than you can see right now. When you feel forgotten, remember the story of Hagar. She was a woman who was cast out, wandering in the wilderness with no place to go and no one to turn to. She must have felt abandoned, rejected, and unseen, but in the midst of her despair, God showed up. He revealed Himself to her as El Roi, the God who sees. In her most broken moment, she encountered the truth that she was not invisible to God. He had been watching over her the entire time. And that same God who saw Hagar sees you. He sees your struggles, your fears, your doubts, and your prayers. He has not overlooked you, and He has not abandoned you. The waiting season is not easy, but it is necessary. It refines you, strengthens you, and prepares you for what is coming next. When Joseph was in prison, it would have been easy for him to think God had forgotten him. After all, he had been faithful, he had done what was right, and yet he still found himself locked away in a place that didn't match the promise God had given him. But just because his location didn't reflect his destiny didn't mean God had abandoned him. In fact, God was using the very place of his confinement to prepare him for the palace. And when the time was right, God elevated him in an instant. Some of you have been questioning why it is taking so long. You have been looking around, wondering why others seem to be advancing while you remain in the same place. But I need you to hear this. Your delay is not a denial. Your waiting is not wasted. God is not just preparing the promise for you. He is preparing you for the promise. And when the right moment comes, He will open doors that no man can shut. The enemy wants you to give up before you see the breakthrough. He wants you to believe that because it hasn't happened yet, it's not going to happen at all. But the devil is a liar. God finishes what He starts. He does not make empty promises. He does not forget his children. He is faithful and he is working all things together for your good. So today I challenge you to shift your perspective. Instead of asking God, have you forgotten me? Start declaring, God, I trust that you are working even when I can't see it. Instead of growing weary in the way, use this time to grow in your faith. Instead of comparing your journey to someone else's, remind yourself that God's timing for you is unique and perfect. There will come a day when you look back at this season and realize that God was there all along. You will see that every delay had a purpose, every detour was necessary, and every hardship was shaping you for what He had in store. And when you step into the fulfillment of what He promised, you will understand why the wait was worth it. God has not forgotten you. He sees you, He knows you, and He has a plan that is greater than anything you could have imagined. Keep holding on, keep trusting, keep believing, because when the appointed time comes, He will show up in a way that leaves no doubt it was always Him, it was always intentional, and it was always for your good. There are moments in life when we feel like we are barely holding on. The weight of disappointment, the sting of rejection, the burden of uncertainty, it all piles up, making us wonder if we will ever make it through. We pray, but the answers don't come fast enough. We believe, but our circumstances don't seem to change. And in those moments, it's easy to ask, God, where are you? Do you see me? Do you care? But I want you to hear me today. God is not absent. He is not ignoring you. He is not turning a blind eye to your struggles. He is working even in the silence. He is moving even when you can't see it. He is orchestrating something greater than you could ever imagine. But the key to making it through is learning to hold on, even when you don't understand. Faith is not built in the moments when everything is going right. Faith is built in the waiting and the pressing, in the moments when nothing makes sense. It's built in the struggle, in the storm, in the wilderness, because it's easy to trust God when the doors are flying open and the blessings are overflowing. But what do you do when the doors remain shut? What do you do when the blessing is delayed? What do you do when everything in you wants to give up? That is the moment when real faith is forged. That is the moment when you decide, even if I don't see it, I still believe. If it doesn't look like it's working out, I still trust Him. Even if the answer hasn't come, I still know that He is faithful. Holding on doesn't mean you won't have moments of doubt. It doesn't mean you won't feel weary. It doesn't mean you won't cry some tears along the way, but holding on means that even in your weakness, you refuse to let go of the promise. It means you remind yourself that the same God who brought you through the last storm will bring you through this one. It means you understand that delay does not mean denial, that silence does not mean abandonment, and that hardship does not mean God has forgotten you. When we look at the Bible, we see example after example of people who had to hold on when everything around them said to give up. Look at Job. He lost everything, his family, his health, his wealth, yet he refused to turn his back on God. He said, though he slay me, yet will I trust him. Job 13:15. Look at Hannah. She prayed and prayed for a child, and for years, nothing happened. But she kept believing, and in due time, God blessed her with Samuel. Look at the woman with the issue of blood, 12 long years of suffering, 12 years of doctors giving up on her, 12 years of waiting for healing. But she refused to let go of faith. She pressed through the crowd. She reached for Jesus, and in a single moment, her whole life changed. What if she had given up in year 11? What if she had decided it was too late? What if she had let her frustration steal her faith? Some of you are right on the edge of your breakthrough, but the enemy is trying to convince you to quit too soon. He wants you to believe that your prayers are pointless, that your faith is wasted, that your hope is foolish. But the devil is a liar. You are closer than you think. You are stronger than you know. And if you just hold on a little longer, you will see that God was working all along. There is something powerful about endurance. The enemy can't defeat a person who refuses to quit. He can throw obstacles in your path. He can send discouragement your way. But if you make up your mind that you will not let go, he loses his grip. That is why scripture tells us in Galatians 6:9, do not grow weary in well-doing, for in due season you will reap if you do not faint. That due season is coming. That appointed time is closer than you think. The enemy will try to distract you with what hasn't happened yet. He will try to make you focus on what's missing, what's broken, what's taking too long. But I need you to shift your focus. Stop looking at what's missing and start thanking God for what's already in motion. Stop magnifying the delay and start magnifying the God who holds time in his hands. Stop speaking words of defeat and start declaring words of victory. I will not give up. I will not break down. I will not let go, because my God is faithful and he is working all things together for my good. Your struggle is not the end of your story. Your pain is not permanent. Your waiting is not in vain. God is doing something bigger, something greater, something beyond your comprehension. And when the time is right, he will make it all make sense. Until then, hold on. Keep believing, keep trusting, because the promise still stands. The breakthrough is still on its way, and the best is yet to come.